their press conference. But to say that we should revisit aid to Israel when what we get in return for that aid comes back in many ways, not only with dollars, like, for example, the Iron Dome. That was pioneered by Raytheon and a lot of experts in Israel, and it's a missile defense that we're now using different ways, as well as the fact that they are a democracy in the Middle East that has our back and provides intelligence that will never be front and center in public.
The point that they made there exposes their agenda. And then they, as you said, Brian, they went up to say they're not a democracy and not an ally. I mean, they are our strongest ally in the Middle East, bar none. They're the only democracy in the Middle East surrounded by countries that want to kill them. And the organization we're going to get to in a second that was going to sponsor this trip is supposed to be in charge of Palestinian democracy. You know that 97% of Palestinians live under the Palestinian Authority, which has not held an election for a decade, because if they held an election, Hamas would win, just like they did in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is a dedicated terrorist organization that seeks the destruction of Israel. These two congresswomen talk about encoded language like the occupation and liberation, using the Palestinian narrative. It is anti-Israeli. It is anti-Semitic. That's the only view they have of that region, and that's why they say the things they say.
If you talk to evangelicals, many of them went to the polls and voted for the conservative, which was Donald Trump in the last election, because of what he would do for judges, because of his pro-life stance, and because of his pro-Israeli stance. It's important to a lot of Christians, or most Christians around the world, for us to support Israel.
But stunningly, most Democrats support. The majority of the American Jewish support goes to Democratic candidates. President Trump only got 24%, when President Bush 43 and this president have been the better allies to Israel.
I think that's starting to change. You're totally right. Historically, that's been the case, but the true colors are starting to show.
This might change a lot.
And by the way, Barack Obama was in single digits for approval rating inside Israel by Israelis. But meanwhile, the big question was, and was pointed by the National Review initially, was who's the group that sponsored these two members of the squad? Why didn't they not go over with the 70 other lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, that have been there weeks prior? Well, this group is questionable, because this group is called MITFA, and that is an acronym. And that group has been supported Palestinian suicide bombers, has talked about the destruction of Israel being one of their goals, and to establish Palestine right there in the region.
Michael Oren is the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, was on our show earlier, and he called it a pro-terrorist group. But if you read anything in the media, they call it an organization. Like the New York Times said, an organization headed by a longtime Palestinian lawmaker. The Washington Post said a non-profit organization headed by a Palestinian lawmaker and longtime peace negotiator. And the LA Times, a non-profit organization headed by a Palestinian lawmaker.
Yeah, if you've been, and I've visited many times, it's a passion of mine, the state of Israel. I mean, we share common biblical heritage, so much security significance there as well. You understand language is everything, and most groups have an agenda. In this case, this group's agenda is to make Israel look bad and demonize them, and that's who they chose to go with.
Well, the Palestinian rights are very much on President Trump's agenda. Jared Kushner is working it. The plan is going to be released after Benjamin Netanyahu's long-awaited plan. Benjamin Netanyahu is gunning for. He's called for another election since September. After that, the plan's going to be out there. But the problem is right now, Palestinian leadership. There's nobody for the Israelis to negotiate with.
Because every time we give them land, Hamas takes over. So what if I live in Minnesota, I'm like, I'm going to give Wisconsin their land, and then they hire a terrorist organization